Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Arts Research Center and our program for this afternoon. Christina Rivera giving a book talk on her book, My Oceans, with a conversation with Shannon Jackson. Just a few words to open. My name is Beth Piatote. I am the director of the Arts Research Center. And this year we're celebrating our 25th year. And so, yes, that is the right reaction. 25 years. We've made a bingo card, 25 events for 25 years, listed on the back. So please, we are taking this year as a time to really celebrate with joy and abundance and to really recognize the sustaining power of art in our lives. And in that mode, we are also celebrating the abundance of this place that we have here and the opportunity to be in conversation with artists and to create art ourselves. So we are giving away prizes at every event this year. And if you are sitting in a lucky chair, you will receive a copy of Christina Rivera's book, which then you can have signed. You can also purchase copies of the book after the reading, thanks to Pegasus joining us here today. We'll be having a reception after the reading and conversation, so there will be refreshments over here. We also have a place where you can make your own bookmark, although Christina also has some beautiful bookmarks. But, you know, you cannot have too many books or bookmarks. So please, these have the slogan on them, can't steal my fill in the blank. Could be joy, could be courage, could be critique, could be anything. One more quick announcement. We have an upcoming Loft Hour on November 13th, celebrating two of our new faculty here, also the right reaction, Zandra Ibarra and Matthew Taylor. Okay. So my job today, I only have to do one thing, and that's to introduce Shannon Jackson. And the first thing I want to say about Professor Jackson is none of us would be here without Shannon Jackson, because she is one of the founders of the Arts Research Center 25 years ago, and has also made a number of other amazing institutional contributions to our university. So we are so honored to have her here with us today to celebrate. So I'll say more about those things in her bio. So I'm going to introduce Professor Jackson, and then Professor Jackson will introduce Christina Rivera. I'm going to get off the stage any second now, and we can move on to the main activity. I will come back for the prizes, though, because I like to do all the fun stuff. Okay. Shannon Jackson is the Cyrus and Michelle Hadidi Professor of the Arts and Humanities, Department Chair of the History of Art, and she recently assumed leadership of the Environmental Arts and Humanities Initiative for UC Berkeley. And the Environmental Humanities Research Initiative is one of our co-sponsors today, and we thank them along with the Dean's Office, the Departments of English, Comparative Literature, ESPM, and the Center for Race and Gender. Professor Jackson's research focuses on two overlapping domains. First, collaborations across visual, performing, and media art forms, and second, the role of the arts in social institutions and in social change. Her most recent books are Backstages, Essays Across Art, Performance, and the Social, and The Human Condition, Media Art from the Kramlich Collection. Recently, she hosted Relevance of Place, a series of online site-specific dialogues about art, ethics, and landscape at Tippett Rise Art Center. In the domain of campus and public service, Jackson has held several roles, including founding leader of the PhD in Performance Studies, department chair of TDPS, co-founder and director of the Arts Research Center, and member and chair of the Campus Budget Committee, and as Associate Vice Chancellor for Arts and Design. So we welcome our esteemed conversation partner, Professor Jackson.
Thank you, Beth, and thank you for all you do with Lori for our campus, bringing the arts together, the arts in the plural, across visual art, performing arts, architecture, film, and video. Tonight, we get to deal with literature and nonfiction. We get to deal with the art form of the word and the assembly around that. And I am really excited from an environmental arts and humanities perspective, to engage with what it is to compose words that sensitize and engage people with the threat of climate change, and in particular thinking about the sub-theme of oceans and blue life. Christina Rivera, we'll get her merits out there. She's a Pushcart Prize winning essayist from Colorado whose girlhood was bordered by coastlines of the Pacific Ocean. She is the debut author, as we know, of My Oceans, Essays of Water, Whales, and Women, and we'll talk about those W's in what comes forward, which was longlisted for the Grey Wolf Press Prize and a finalist for the Siskiyou Prize for New Environmental Literature. Her work has won the John Burroughs Nature Essay Award, which is the highest honor for a creative nonfiction essay on place, science, and the environment. And it also appeared in Orion. Her work, not only that piece, has appeared in Orion and the Kenyon Review, Long Reads, The Cut, Terrain.org, all of the coolest places to be publishing. A lot of nonfiction, but still personalized. What do we know is the difference between nonfiction and fiction, really? Really, really compelling narratives that connect people with the most important issues of the day. Christina credits the fragmentation of her writing to her two young children, and is also the grateful recipient of residencies at the Malay Arts, Craig Garden, and the Wellstone Center. And we're going to talk about fragmentation too, and fragmentation being something that obviously has a pejorative term, as if we're all supposed to be whole. But what's the productivity of fragmentation? What's the productivity of actually understanding ourselves as interdependent, non-coherent living life forms? So more ahead. Welcome, Christina, to the stage.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that introduction, and Beth and Lori and Lily and everyone here who has hosted me with such kindness and welcomed me. I'm just so grateful to be here, and for everyone who showed up and made time in their day today. Can you hear me okay? Oh, okay. Yes, so I have created this little mind map to navigate us through some passages. Shannon came up with a really lovely prompt to offer passages that are emblematic of what you wanted to do with this project. And so I got to spend some time thinking about that question and created and pulled these passages specifically with some of this direction. I tend not to work in slides or linear ways of thinking. I tend to think in circles and swirls and flows. And so even my presentations are like that. And what did I do with my book? I put it right here. Okay, so I am going to jump in with my author's note to begin, because I think it does some tone setting that feels important to me. This is not an essay collection, not a gathering of things once scattered. This is a book of essays, each piece born under the same moon. Fragments, yes, because womanhood is fragmented and motherhood is fragmented, and my understanding of my place in nature is as one of billions of faceted fragments. Motherhood is not a tidy or linear narrative. It's punctuated. I wrote this book between nap times and meal times and bedtimes. I also wrote this book in pieces because it was through my fragmentation that the distinctions between the Earth's oceans and my own receded. The shape, the movement of these essays was always waves, sometimes crashing, sometimes lapping, sometimes with riptides that pulled me into existential crisis and spit me out. I don't pretend to have answers. If my journey has taught me anything, it's to rigorously confess that I make mistakes, that we have all made so many mistakes that have landed us upon this eroding shoreline of warming waters, melting glaciers, and waning species. As for how to read a book of essays, there is no one way. You can follow the threads of their undulating order, or reach for the themes that pull you. Humpback whale songs travel ahead and behind paths of migration. When one whale learns the song of another, its own song evolves. As I have woven melody from my ancestors and teachers into these sentences, weave into your story what resonates. Oh, thank you. So the first thing I wanted to do with this book project was make space for a fragmented self, celebrate a fragmented self, and pull together a book that was fragmented, despite the fact that everyone told me not to do it. The essays are also lyrical and experimental, which just means that I wanted the margins and the white space to do a lot of talking and asking questions, and for the reader to engage with their own questions while doing the reading. Some of these pictures for this visual tour, my background is in experiential education, and so I spent 16 years taking groups of students on study abroad programs to very remote corners of the world, so that was kind of the canvas by which I picked up all of these stories. I kept those. You can see that collaging was also an earlier form of how I even gathered the stories. And then one of the book's origin stories is at the Malay colony in upstate New York, where I finally had 10 days to just sit and write and reflect and walk slowly. I had 2 small children at the time and a lovely partner who took them both from me. And it was at this barn that I finally found a shape for my book of fragments, and that shape was a spider's web that was literally underneath the barn's eaves. And I was watching this spider build this web and saw that, oh, this is a shape that can hold my fragments. So I went up to the big building and printed off this diagram of a spider web and put it on the wall. And I had brought along these photographs because I did spend some time working as a photographer as well. And I had all these small photographs that I had taken, and I used them as portals, because I find that photographs are wonderful portals for capturing a story. And I put them all up on the wall in this spiderweb form. And once I had the form, then the book started to come together. Blood Moon is the first essay in this collection, and it's the only one that came to me. Most of my essays take about 14 revisions and 14 drafts, but this one was the only one that came to me in one go. And that is the first essay in the collection. This is my daughter as I brought my spiderweb home and created my little crazy wall. So the first piece I'm going to read is from the essay 2 Breaths. And this essay, the second thing that I really wanted to do with this book was show embodied environment. I find that statistics and percentages and numbers are hard, make it hard for me to feel in my body what's really going on a larger scale. And so I was trying to collect these stories of embodied climate. I didn't know at the time that it would have to be my body. At the last minute, my publisher put memoir in the back of this book, and that was a shock to me because I didn't realize that. But of course, if I'm sharing embodied stories, I was going to have to be vulnerable and put my body on the line here. So in these pictures, I'm going to read a bit from 2 Breaths, but I think you can. It's easy for me, and I hope you to see too that when you layer these images on top of each other, this baby manta ray wrapped in its own wings, and myself nursing my first child in a blanket. I think these 2 images sitting next to together say a lot about what I was doing with this project and this essay. Okay, so the context that you need for this piece is that I'm sitting at the bottom of the ocean on a night dive with my husband, and we'll start there. And I have a panic attack, and I've done hundreds of dives, so this is new to me to have panic underwater. My hand moves as quickly as a hand can move underwater for my husband's. He knows my quiet languages. He reads them in my eyes. Even behind the scuba masks, he proves this literacy as he returns my hand squeeze, a little stronger than normal, because he too is wondering what's going on with me. I, after all, am the expert. I am the one with the dive master certification and dozens of night dives sketched into my logbook. I organized this dive with the manta rays. It was my idea, my wish. So what are these hooves now trampling in my trust? I know anxiety, but the slow kind that accumulates like tumbleweed through the night and is brushed to the side by the velocity of day. I don't recognize this mob in my heart all at once, scanning for an exit. I look up. There's the surface of the ocean, only 30 feet above my head. I could take one breath of air from my tank and slowly kick and slowly exhale to the top and reach it just fine. I know this because it's one of the first diving tests I passed for my certifications. But there is danger, equally silent and lethal danger. If I did not exhale as I made my emergency swimming ascent, the air in my lungs would expand, and with nowhere to go, the air could break through the blood vessels in my lungs. The invisible pressure could rupture and collapse my lungs. Technically, it's called pneumothorax. Casually, it's called burst lungs. As I'm looking at the roof of the ocean, I'm thinking of this because I'm thinking of what lives on the other side. This night dive is different from the last one I did with my husband. The difference is the two small children, by now tucked into their beds by the babysitter, two children who have no place even in their borderless imaginations to know their parents tonight are sitting on the floor of the ocean, swaying with sea fans, pointing flashlights at an underwater night sky of sparkling plankton. Looking at the top of the water, I understand it is my distance from my children that makes my eyes wide enough to speak the quiet language of panic. Luckily, a scuba regulator functions much like a brown paper bag. I can hear the drag of air from my tank, see my exhalation and rising bubbles. And I'm practiced at slow breathing, especially underwater. I am at home in the underwater world after hundreds of night dives, or dives I did not expect to find this panic in it. But no one told me about the new meaning of death upon the birth of my children. This was not mentioned in the shelf of motherhood books I read. No one told me about the heaviness, the blue whale weight of walking into the future with the baby on my hip and another child in Velcro shoes holding my hand, about how the small bodies add gravity to life. From the ocean floor looking up, I feel this pressure, and I am not the only warm-blooded mammal in the ocean tonight with this anxiety. A sperm whale births her babe in the sunlight zone of the ocean. Close to the surface is where she nurses her infant for 2 or more years, but the fat in her milk comes from the pressure from meals consumed 2,000 feet below, in frigid, high-pressure depths where her babe can't follow. So while the sperm whale mother is foraging, she leaves her child to the care of an orbiting pod of related females who babysit, sometimes even wet nursing the babe themselves. A mother culture, it's called by whale biologists. While mom is below, she is still in touch with her offspring, sending messages via sonar clicks. Mom typically stays in the depths hunting for about an hour, unless she panics. Peter Matheson once documented a whaler ship chase of a sperm whale. The whaler's sonar pinged the animal at 1,000 feet deep as it tracked her panicked flight, waiting for her to run out of air and into the crosshairs of the harpooner above. Matheson noted of the sperm whale's ability to stay submerged, this time is rapidly decreased by panic. I know the sperm whale's quick breath, the time I turned around in the pool and my 3-year-old son was sinking in the deep end. My daughters fall from a car seat teetering on the edge of a table. 5 calls to poison control for the berries and tubes of old medicines my toddlers put to their lips. 2 swift Heimlich maneuvers, a broken arm, midnight runs to the emergency room for spiking temperatures. My reoccurring nightmares in which climate disasters arrive. Down in the high-pressure depths with my body anchored by rocks in my husband's hand, I'm thinking about death. I do not ponder death as much as I did before I had children. I no longer have the time to meditate. I don't remember the dreams I used to prompt and record each night. I don't walk so close to cliffs of bodily risk anymore. Those were qualities of my pre-child life, of regular Earth gravity living, of nights uninterrupted by monsters, wet sheets, and the chills of fever. Motherhood breaks linear time. Life becomes instead punctuated by the unwavering eye contact of a nursing babe, by a small body shuddering with relief against my chest, by my son's outstretched arm pointing to the moon. Swaying with the sea fans, my husband squeezes my hand. Again, he has read in my quiet languages that I'm okay enough to be daydreaming or water dreaming or whatever one calls the cartwheels of the waking human imagination at nighttime on the floor of the sea. He sees, too, that I'm looking at the ocean's surface in a funny way. I squeeze his hand back, and a beam of light swings like a car's headlights into the fog of plankton. It points at the flicker of faraway wingtips, and though a diver is never supposed to hold her breath, I have no choice. Our first visiting manta ray, an entirely non-violent creature of 1.5 tons, swims toward us as her ancestors have been swimming for 5 million years. She flies into the center of the flashlights, illuminating the plankton of her midnight snack, except night and day are not distinctions for those who live in swallowed light. Humans don't know if the manta ray sleeps. To the best knowledge of those who study her, she's a perpetually swimming thing. This manta now swoops in impossibly graceful loops in our light beams. I lean back. I would fall if the water did not hold me. My sighs captured in iridescent ovals, rising towards the ocean's top, toward the land of my sleeping babies, whom I have forgotten, whom I can never forget, but whom I can hold even as I'm swaying with sweet sea fans. I see myself in the eyes of the manta as a land animal of too many lanky appendages, anchored among rocks, submerged in her ocean sphere of pre-existing laws and spirit. We are of different worlds, and yet we share viscera. We both have a heart, a stomach, intestines, a gallbladder, kidney, liver, uterus, ovaries. Who would know the difference of our innards and our brain? The manta has the largest brain of any fish with developed areas for problem solving, learning, communication, coordination, and intelligence. To the surprise of marine biologists, manta rays in a mirror test, widely used to gauge self-awareness, were able to recognize themselves. I have forgotten my husband's hand. He has forgotten mine. But under the swooping manta, there is no room for anything but awe. My thoughts of my children are tucked away. Baby manta rays are born wrapped in their own wings like a blanket. There is a single set of images of a manta ray birthing in the wild. It was taken by Roberto Fabri in the Red Sea in 1968. In the black and white series, a tidy bundle of wrapped manta bursts from its mother's body in a cloud of white. The photographer's caption in tiny font reads, "The manta ray was speared." It represented a big trophy. And if you squint at the photo of the mother mid-labor, you can see the man's murky outline in the shadow just behind her. You can see the long white glint of his metal spear gun. He stands waiting a few feet from her arcing, birthing body, a few feet from her eyes. I'm going to stop there. Oh, thank you. That was the longest one. Okay. Moving on. The next thing that I was trying to do was embrace vulnerability. And this piece that I'm going to share I don't think I've read from it ever before, and yeah, like I said, I didn't know I'd have to put my body on the line to share all these stories, but I was in Professor Greg's class today, and he was saying the students were, writing some pretty emotional work, and we had just had this conversation about how important it is to bring emotion. And so, I think that now that the book has been out in the world for 6 months, that the resounding piece of feedback I get is that people have spent a lot of time crying with it, and that that's necessary. I think I cried into every page reading of this book, writing it, and I think crying frees us to do a lot of other things. Okay, so I'm just going to read a section of this piece. It has 2 different titles. So this piece was published by The Cut magazine, and I got to work with a really fabulous editor at The Cut. And she told me to put more of myself into the piece. And it was very wise advice, and I was shocked by what came out of it. So this piece is quite different than what's in the book, and I'm excited to read from the piece that's at The Cut. So if you want to look at the differences or read it, definitely go to The Cut one. This is about a captive whale named Corky, who is still today at SeaWorld at this moment, making circles in her tank. I learned the full story of Corky from the ecologist Carl Safina's book, Beyond Words. Corky was only 4 years old and barely finished nursing when she was hunted off the coast of British Columbia in 1969. Her family was encircled and chased to the docks, where she was separated from her mother. The sequence of abduction, isolation, and incarceration forced upon that small whale by her captors was unbearable, but it was another incident involving a cry by Corky that actually shattered glass, that made me put down the book and weep. Emotions leaked also from some unnamed reservoir in my own body. Sound is energy in acoustic form. It travels in undulating shapes and vibrates at a frequency measured in waves per second, or hertz. A bass guitar's natural frequency is 40 to 150 hertz. A woman's scream ranges from 30 to 150. And according to the San Diego Opera, wine glass shattering waves pass at 556 hertz. Orca vocals can reach 40,000 hertz. And the tank's glass that Corky shattered was an inch thick. I'm going to skip ahead a bit. The next day, as my hands massaged the silken head of my 6-year-old daughter, she floated, eyes closed, cheeks puffed on her back in the bathtub. I have taught her how to lengthen her inhale, how to fill her lungs with air, how to allow herself to rise, that her body is made for elevation. But trust is not my daughter's inclination. That she let me cradle her head, it's no small act. She will not let her father push her on the pedal bike. She will not let her big brother touch her wiggly bottom tooth. She will not high-five the man who greets her dad on the sidewalk. She has watched most of her life from my hip, except she has watched carefully, or felt carefully, because something was transferred. In the bathtub, I sensed this caution and what she must let go of, to starfish her body and close her eyes, to let me thumb the shampoo suds from her soft temples. She lets down her guard because I am her mother, and because there is a special agreement about trust between two people who are inclined otherwise. In 1980, Corky was 11 months pregnant. She was not new to pregnancy. She had already carried a calf full term in 1977. When that calf was born, Corky tried to teach him how to swim in the circles the tank demanded. But the babe slammed into walls, opening a wound on his tiny jaw. Corky buffered the babe from hitting the walls, but in doing so kept nudging the baby into a position where the calf could not sort where to suckle from. Unable to nurse, the calf withered. Humans removed the baby, winched it in a sling by crane from the pool to a place where they could force feed him. A young scientist named Alexandra Morton, who was studying the communication of killer whales, was present that day. Morton, in her book Not on My Watch, recalled Corky's response after the babe was removed from her tank. She flung her body again and again against the spot where humans stood to command her to perform jumps, wave her fin, give them a ride. Then each time she sank to the bottom and made the same call over and over for days, stopping only to grab a breath at the surface and then return to the bottom of the tank where she lay on the drain. I searched the newspapers in California that year. They used vague language like, the first killer whale born in captivity died soon after its birth. The calf, which weighed 300 pounds at birth, began losing weight. And there was concern about the calf bumping into the walls of the tank. 6 more of Corky's babies died in cement pools after the first. Not one calf lived longer than 46 days. Orcas are pregnant for about 17 months. Corky today is no longer ovulating. Over the course of her captivity, she was pregnant more than 137 months. That's 11.42 years. I did the math 3 times, once to break down the number into allotments of time that felt relatable, once to overcome my denial of the math, once to decide that 11.42 years of failed pregnancy is unfathomable, even or maybe especially as a woman who has experienced 7 months of failed pregnancy herself. I don't like to remember those months. Sometimes I wonder if I've lost memories that sat on the surface of my life while I lay upon the drain. In 2023, the Supreme Court sentenced countless bodies to the unwanted captivity and imprisonment of forced reproduction. Did I fight when Roe was overturned? No. I sank to the bottom of my tank and cried, and how many cried with me, and how many didn't cry but witnessed and did nothing. When I was in high school, a classmate told his friends, who told the entire school, that the bloody white sock in the back of his black Jeep was the trophy of taking my virginity. And when I found him at a party that Friday night, I pushed him with 2 hands against the wall and I yelled, "Take it back, tell the truth, you fucking liar." And with the eyes of the entire party on him, he looked around and he looked me in the eye and he said, "It happened." And this is how I learned that crowds believe men and men believe themselves. And that nothing has changed between a 90s high school keg party and the 2018 Senate Judiciary Committee. Nothing has changed except the pitch of my scream. Does Corky feel the inheritance of the oceans she was denied in her whale bones? My father, like Corky, was 4 years old when he lost his mother. She died in a hospital at 38. My father was the youngest of her 9 children. On her death certificate, the wobbly typewriter letters float in the forms boxes. Cause of death, cardiovascular collapse due to surgery, hysterectomy. There's a rumor that what's written on this death certificate is not the whole truth. There's a whispered version of events in which my grandmother died from blood poisoning from the dirty tools used in the botched abortion of her 10th pregnancy. The hospital secretary typed hysterectomy into my grandmother's death certificate, but abortion in 1943 was illegal. And maybe a legal explanation was needed for the damage to my grandmother's female parts. The stories of botched abortions are likely often buried in shame and illegalities and inaccurate death certificates. But in the process of fact-checking this book, I reviewed my paternal grandmother's death certificate and noticed for the first time that under the smaller form question, other conditions, including pregnancy, the document is annotated in light cursive handwriting with 93 days. Today, Corky is about 59 years old. 55 of those years lived captive and performative. But once upon a time, Corky shattered glass. To shatter glass, the vibration of sound must match the resonation of what it shatters. What can our shared resonance with Corky's story tell us about breaking the glass of our own cages? Sorry, that one got to me.
You got this.
Vulnerability. Okay, so I have one more kind of objective that I was shooting for with this book, and that was to put it together with shape and language that decentered humans and recentered ecosystems. And I told you that I built this book based on a spider web. Sometimes we talked about this in the art class as well. Things happen on subconscious levels and manifest in surprising ways. And one thing that happened is that a lot of editors told me to line this book up from beginning to end. And sorry, I've been telling this story so many times I can't remember if I already told it. Did I already tell the 4 circles? Okay. And I didn't know, and I had a lot of editors say, why don't you put 4 circles in the beginning? Because it's like the beginning of your story. And I resisted it, and I couldn't figure out why, and I didn't put it in the beginning. I put it in the middle, and then when I looked at the spider webs later, again, I noticed that it actually has these 4-ish circles right in the middle, and this book has this essay called 4 Circles in the Middle, and and it's because there is no beginning and end. It's that all these fragments orbit this 4 Circles essay. Another shape that it took was this kind of forms. The editors also came back and said we need a tighter theme, and so we pulled into this theme of water, whales, and women, and making sure every essay tied at least 2 to 3 of those elements together. And then at that point, I created this kind of wave structure. And then I'm going to read from this piece. This will be my last reading it's called Qui Seeds. And that is not a word from Webster's dictionary. It is a word that was created in this participatory artwork by these 2 women, who I think are in the Bay Area, actually.
Hadidi's at Berkeley.
Oh, cool. That's awesome.
Alicia is at CCA.
Oh.
Yeah, they're part of us.
Oh, that's really cool. They actually invited me to create a word, so I'm going to start putting my brain toward that. But I did play with their words in this piece, and I'm just going to read a section of it. At age 40, I took an intelligence test. Not the standardized IQ, but a newer assessment created by Harvard Dr. Howard Gardner. Dr. Gardner suspected intelligence couldn't be boxed by one overarching mechanism and might be better represented by the many dimensions in which different people process information. After filling in the little boxes of Gardner's survey and tallying the results, I was shocked by the conclusion. I shot an email in jest to my boss, for whom I had already worked for 15 years. So my intelligence type is something called naturalistic. He didn't laugh. It had not been his idea for me to take the survey. That I had completed the assessment on my own initiative pointed to a leak in my loyalty to the senior administrative position. I was unaware of the leak myself and had only thought the results curious. Dr. Gardner's test concluded that my primary strength as one high in naturalistic intelligence was finding patterns and relationships in nature. How exactly did that align with the spreadsheets, surveys, staffing interviews, and statistical reports that consumed my 50 hours a week? I laughed too, because naturalist was not even included in Dr. Gardner's famous book, Multiple Intelligences, when it was first published in 1993. He only added the 8th green branch of intelligence to his model years later, around the time I was in high school. He characterized the naturalist intelligence as having an innate inclination for observation, a curiosity for seeing how things work, and an instinctual connection with non-human species. That description felt familiar. There is a word for seeing relations in the world as flowing. Admirational is defined as looking at the space or relationship between things as the primary point of focus. If you don't remember learning this word, it's because it's not in Webster's dictionary. You'll find this neologism only in the online dictionary created by the Bureau of Linguistic Reality. which is a new dictionary, only about the same age as my daughter. Heidi Quante and Alicia Scott, when they devised and launched the project in 2014, described it as a participatory artwork informed by the public for the purpose of collecting, translating, and creating a new vocabulary for the Anthropocene. Though this Anthropocene dictionary is online and exists in no paper or printed form, I was thrilled and created one for myself. I printed out each word on a note card and stacked them on my desk. Their physical existence brings me joy, this naming of things I have felt for a lifetime, but which had no official recognition. Words like kinkara, a person of any gender who plays a loving maternal role in raising children they have not physically birthed. Or epocitude, the reassuring awareness that while humanity might succeed in destroying itself, the earth will survive us. Or surbrace, conviction to the right thing after one has already let go of the outcome. I love these words. They give me permission to think outside of the box of Webster's dictionary, to name things in my own life that hold audience in my heart but lack proper name. Words like the verb for missing the blue of a Colorado sky underneath a dangerous AQI of smoke. Or an adjective for the ache in my bones for the absence of the migratory birds in the sky. Though they probably have no word for it, whales know the admirational. Rebecca Giggs, in her book Fathoms, explains, because cetaceans evolved their communicative abilities in the absence of hands and facial expressions, they evolved a language centered exclusively on their interrelationships. I love this notion that in the vast seas and absence of clues, the space between whales became the point of focus. The whale's evolution gives me hope in the face of the growing isolation of humans on Earth. Maybe a shift of perspective awaits in the vastness, a revolution that holds the space in between things in focus. Humpback whale songs are typically made of repeating patterns that can travel ahead and behind paths of migration. When one whale hears another song, the pattern can evolve into a more complex version of the same song. But once every 3 years, humpback whale songs change in structure entirely. A team at the University of Queensland explained in Giggs' book, when their songs cannot become more ornate and still be remembered, then the degree of complexity crashes. A whale singing a less demanding song stands out against those more complicated tunes. During these cultural shifts, new whale songs sweep the seas in simpler compositions. Scientists call them revolutionary songs. As for my own vocabulary revolution, the stack of new words on my desk has moved to a new home in my heart. Kinkara is the flushed face of my childless by choice best friend after driving through a snowstorm to sit on my couch and teach my daughter her first chords on the guitar. I find epocitude when I sit in the gnarled root arms of a 3,000-year-old bristlecone pine tree and surrender to its densely storied resiliency. And surbrace is my daily practice of letting go of my fear to focus on living this life one day at a time. In 1977, humpback whale songs were put on 2 phonographic golden records and sent into space above the Voyager shuttle for the ears of extraterrestrial life. Carl Sagan curated the record, entitled it A Love Song. The probe is still adrift and transmitting today, and what a body to bob in. In 2023, Nanograv reported a major discovery. They found compelling evidence for the physical existence of space-time waves. The report confirmed time isn't straight, nor space smooth. Rather, space-time turns and ripples. And among those waves, the Earth itself bobs. The astrophysicist Michael Lamb described their conclusion: the picture that emerges is a universe that looks like a choppy sea. I love that bobbing in a black sea is our universe, is our astrophysical nature. That whale song, despite our inability to translate it, fosters such awe. We've set it adrift in the choppy sea of space. Looking back upon the non-funny revelation I shared with my non-laughing boss, I see now the tension of that dormant seed within me, my buried love for admirational ways of knowing that didn't fit into a traditional academic or IQ boxes, and also a hint of my future where the jumping of linked metaphor in a long letter was more vital than the bullet points of a resume. Of lyricism, Rachel Carson once said, "If there is poetry in my book about the sea, it's not because I put it in there, but because no one could write truthfully about the sea and leave out the poetry." Poetry, too, lights up the right brain, tills the liminal, prepares the land for holisonic visions that might collapse the complexities that no longer serve us, leaving space for something new to sweep through. Okay. Oh. Thank you.
Are you hearing me? There we go. It wasn't hard to listen. Thank you. And I think some in this room, including me, have had the chance to read the book. But now I get to reread the book with your voice in my head, and even your gestural impulses, to even thinking about your image as you were reading. So I'm just going to say it, you're a great reader of your work, which not all writers are. So
Still
yeah.
kind of new to it.
Well done. And Christina said she was told by others never to read more than 5 minutes at a. But we're a wonky group, and I think it was.
I gave you guys 8 minutes.
It was a really, and I think it gives a span of the book's reach and its preoccupations, and there's more. So I hope you all can encounter more with it in the chance to read this entirely beautiful, great book, which really moves something that I think we used to call, maybe still call, science writing into a really different memoirist, autobiographical, nonfiction, fiction, I'll also say collage endeavor. So I think I'll maybe ask Christina a couple of questions I had in mind, and I'll just open it up to yours. I appreciated, even before she meditated even more, about the idea of fragmentation and saying her days were fragmented by kids, saying that the fragmented self was part of the goal, part of what was, and maybe just to linger a minute about what makes us think that something is whole in the first place, and what makes us recognize that it might have always already been fragmented, always already a space where intimate forces, external forces, systems, chemistries, arcs of history are all colliding in something that we might think of as whole. Here's a human being, Christina Rivera, who is actually this repository of all of these different forces and systems, right? And I feel an amazing thing about the book is that you're writing with the awareness of all of that complexity, and from an environmental and ecological perspective, an awareness of all of that complexity is necessary. It seems to me so important to recognize that anything, including this plastic cup, comes to us via a whole variety of systemic processes, and that Christina came to us through those as well. So for me, fragmented writing or fragmented thinking might be more just a way of writing interdependently, to think about the interdependence of people and systems and entities. And for me, a lot of the ecologically engaged art that inspires me most is really able to navigate that interdependence, how to get a small thing like holding a baby to also be a place to talk about very big things around toxicity, around systems historic systems of gendered violence, et cetera. So that is, to me, one of the wonderful things about the book, is that the necessity of thinking interdependently for an ecological perspective is such important content, and that Christina's book has found a form for that content. So that's more of a declaration than a question. But I guess I feel like through words and through constructions of sentences and through also being willing to interrupt yourself and go from, as you got a sense here, from a small thing about a whale, a small thing about a baby connecting to a bigger historic thing about a whale, that there's a relation, you know. So maybe with that, I'll go to asking you a little bit more about not just, quote, fragmentation, but about collage.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure. Yeah.
Can you all hear me? Thank you for seeing that, because it has been a journey, and at every step of the way, I encountered so much pushback on this. I knew the book wanted to be fragmented, and every mentor I had said, you can't do that. You can't debut with an essay collection. You can't. These are fragments. They have to come together. Every editor, and so it was such a journey to be like, no, we're gonna do this. And I had to find an agent, and even the agent, when I first wrote her, I sent her some questions and I said, like, everyone's telling me I can't do this. What do I do? And she goes, well, like, based on what I've heard about your project from you in summary, yeah, that's probably going to be my advice too. You can't do it. And she's like, but I also like your query letter. I want to read your chapters. And she read 50 pages and she goes, oh, this is an essay collection of fragmented pieces, and now I get it, and we're gonna do this together. And so having her faith in me, and then when we went on submission, it was the same thing. Every editor saying, I want this to have, like, I like it, but I want it to have a beginning and an end. Like, let's make this a straight narrative. And I did, I even did a rewrite. And it was painful for me to do that, and it didn't pass because it lacked soul and heart, and I didn't believe in it. And then we finally found, again, an editor who said, oh, this is an essay collection. That's what it will come out in the world as. And I was so angry at so many people telling me to make it a straight narrative that I wrote an entire draft of another book in those 4 months while I was waiting, because I was like, I can write narrative. Like, I can turn the pages.
I know how to do that.
Yeah, I can do that, but this is not a book. This is a book where I want people to sit with the white space and the questions. And so, and I doubted myself at some points during the process, but now that it's out in the world, and now that I see that it could have only been fragmented, and it could have only been caught in that web. That's the only shape it could have come out in the world. To do anything else would have been inauthentic. So,
can you bring the web and collage part down a little bit more?
Yeah.
So obviously, and now even if I think, now you've just made my declaration into a question that allowed you to say something back. Thank you for that. And thanks for telling us that story, and thanks for believing in yourself, and thanks to your agent for believing in you too. I can't really imagine what beginning, middle, and end might be. First, I was a young girl. Then I was a less young girl. Then I was, how would that really have worked, So instead, the book is constructed by sort of thematic topics where there's an interweaving of a lot of different references. And if I can just say a little bit more about, I think one of the huge challenges of engaging ecologically, and why it's so hard to sensitize people to something like climate change, in that biggest term, has to do with the realization that or the difficulty of realizing that an action taken here has huge effects there, meaning what's happening in terms of fossil fuels or carbon footprints in one part of the planet affects somebody else in the Amazon. Or action taken then is affecting us now. Actions taken now affect us later. And the hard thing about getting people to mobilize around climate, as opposed to perhaps other social issues, is the difficulty of holding that together. And for me, that's why something like fragmented narrative, or why collage or webs of associations might work, might be forms that hold there and here, past, present, future. We're holding this together, or small and big, and that there is something about the form in text, also something about the form in pictures that is more adequate to the difficulty of representing a climate theme. So that's amongst the things that I found here in why this book had to traverse as much as it did. So that's my declaration again. And I wonder, does that have any resonance with you in terms of the associations you're putting together, or why you had to tell your agent, I can't make this Aristotelian?
Well, it's funny. I do feel like the fragmented shape speaks to certain bodies more than others. And like I said, I worked with teenagers and college students in experiential education for a long time, and we used to do a lot of writing exercises. And they would all do these hermit crab essays. Do you know what a hermit crab essay is? It's where you use another shape. So I have one hermit crab essay in here. It's called Anatomy of a Seagull. And each title is a piece of the bird, and underneath of it is a paragraph that ties the metaphor to, in this case, experiences of violence toward women, to a piece of the bird. So it's a hermit crab. It's a story that uses, like a hermit crab, a shell to live in it, to as its home. And I just noticed that teenagers and like young people in general loved that shape and that form, and were so naturally inclined toward it. And I was using it a lot before I even knew what, I was doing it. And then people were like, that's a hermit crab. I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. And so that's why I kind of thought, I was like, there's a place in the world for a book of essays and experimental pieces, because I see it especially in younger demographics that this fragmented shape makes more sense to them. And I don't know exactly what that says, but I also feel that a lot of women also identify with the fragmented kind of experience of being, and definitely mothers feel shattered by motherhood. That is a very, very common narrative. So, yeah.
All right. Another question I was going to ask, which was about the W's, water, whales, and women.
Yeah.
But maybe even more about the last one, women. And you shared with us some reflections that were from motherhood, and also sharing the challenge of sharing. Thank you for sharing of what it is to have endured gendered violence as well. So there is, I think, a really an opportunity for women to talk about gender in relationship to ecology and the world and reproduction. And there's also a risk too, just because women's bodies might get naturalized in a certain way. There's a heteronormative orientation about who feels what, who endures what. And just even listening to you now and thinking about how you felt anxiety in a new form that you'd never felt before, and you're framing it as post-mother, that post-mother, it makes you feel anxious in a way that you hadn't before. I think about the insight, actually, that you have to the world that's manifesting as anxiety and might get pathologized as anxiety, but it's actually a different kind of insight that you have. And at the same time, I worry for you about getting marked as like, this is a woman thing, a mother thing. And I say this as somebody who's had 4 pregnancies and 2 bio children. You know, just that whole thing about narrating from that perspective, which is such an incredible perspective, and then also the risk of getting circumscribed by the woman perspective.
Yeah, no, I hear that, and I'm aware of those risks. I think like I've come to terms with this book being memoir, and I couldn't have written an honest book without having an honest account of my gendered experience in the world. And I think the risk of that is exclusivity, and I've tried really hard to be inclusive, but I also I don't even have to try that hard, because to labor something into the world, to birth something in the world, is not an exclusive experience to female bodies. It's entirely inclusive to labor art and gardens and children and everything into the world. And it was actually in the art class that I visited today, it was really sweet, because one young man immediately said, "Oh, I identified with mother. I've been taking care of my small nephew, and I fully identified with mother through this entire piece." And I was so happy that he felt included. So I do think that it is, to caretake is inclusive, and to bring something you love into the world and to take care of it is inclusive. And I think that is one of the take-home messages of this book. And also to just switch from a culture, which I think is focused very much right now on control, to a culture that is focused on consent and care. And I think those are, again, entirely inclusive principles.
Thank you.
Thanks for being worried about me.
No, I know. Yeah. Maybe just a last thing is, I wanted to, for anybody who is something of a writer or also thinking about the Arts Research Center, which really brings together art forms from across fields, that officially we're with a writer tonight who thinks about text. And thanks for the shout out about the Bureau of Linguistic Reality, which I think of that platform as thinking about words. It's thinking about then, constructing your new neologism that's adequate to the Anthropocene. But we ended up talking about images tonight too.
Yeah.
And just maybe meditating in terms of helping us understand your process as a writer, that this is part of your process. In working with you in the lead up to this, you said, I'm going to make a visual, that you want to have a visual. You've been working with people who do. And just if you want to share a little bit more, you said something about a picture being a portal, even as your métier is to produce sentences in books. Just sort of a little thought about that.
Yeah, I might pull up, because I shared with the art class today too, because it was such an interesting question to think about the role of visual art in literary art. Oh, here we go. And I had shared with them, I put together a different kind of mind map for them. And, and there are a few things here. I think the art element allowed me to retain ownership over the book, because it's a funny thing to put your life story in this little square thing that has a price tag on the back. And so I did this collage bookmark that I collaged with my daughter, and we sat down and did this art project together, and I pulled words out from my journal and put them on there, and it was a very interesting moment because she actually pulled, it was her idea, she said, oh, let's have her sitting on a rock of your words, and and she went into my office and pulled this page of an old manuscript out of the recycle bin, and by some miraculous moment, the text that she had on there matched the text that I had pulled out from my journal. It was one of those wild moments. But I, like, even one of the students in the class said, because I started off by saying I have no exposure to visual arts other than this art residency. My father never went to college. My mother was the first in her family too, and it was part of my messaging. It was that, like, I go to college to become an engineer, which is what all my siblings became, because it was the point of going to school was to become financially secure. And so and one of the students pointed out, they're like, but look at what you've done. Like, look at the way you're using collage and the way you've implemented art and tied it into all your process. And the stamps and the pencils with the puns on them and all these things. But I think that was just my way of fingerprinting the book and of keeping a level of ownership. So it was a nice reflection that I had today. Just how you're right. And I forgot about my whole photography background. But yeah, there's a great prompt, to like take a photograph and to start writing and to use it as a portal and just draw everything you see that's going around outside. And I've used that prompt over and over and over again because my memory gets faulty, but a photograph, you can always walk through the door of a photograph. So that is always the first draft. That's in a very early stage.
Sometimes these invitations make you realize something that's right under your nose about yourself.
Yeah.
So glad that the Berkeley invite, including getting to visit Greg's class, helped bring that out. All right. Well, maybe we could turn to questions or observations or reflections from people who've gathered here, listening to Christina. We can use mine.
Thank you. I was kind of wondering about if you could touch on like your fascination with water and whales and manta rays, and if that's something you've always been drawn to, or was that something that kind of developed after motherhood?
That's a good question. I think I've always been obsessed with the ocean. So I did my dive master when I was about 22, and I had no interest in working as a dive master. I just wanted to be underwater. There are two things that bring me extreme joy, and one is salsa dancing, like Latin dancing, and like something about following and being caught up in the music. I just overflow with joy. And the other one is being at the bottom of the ocean, and I don't like swimming. I don't like waves even. It's so funny because people, like, I'll go to the beach with people and they're like, you're the ocean girl, don't you want to go jump in the waves? And I'm like, I actually don't like being beat up by waves. I like to be completely still and buoyant, and I really love the sound underwater, which I have a whole essay based on some of those sounds. And so and I like to, like muck diving is a special type of diving where you actually go stare at sand and muck, and you see what rises when you are not moving and when your shadow doesn't cross over. And that was like my favorite form of diving. So and I think whales, I mean, everyone's obsessed with whales. They're the gateway animal to water, conservation initiatives and efforts. And at first I was like, well, maybe, like, why should I write about whales? Like, anyone could write about whales. But every time I would dive deeper, so, there's an essay called The 17th Day, and specifically I was like, oh, like, everyone loves orcas. Like, why would I write about, what entitles me to writing about orcas? But every time I wrote I figured out, I revealed this mystery of how my body was infinitely connected. So in that case, I realized that I have a toxic burden in my body that I've likely passed on to my children. And this orca has also passed on. Orcas, have these same problems with toxic burdens that they're passing on through nursing to their children and to their offspring. And so finding that connection and then realizing, oh, maybe this is why I'm obsessed. It's not just a fascination. There's actually a mystery to be solved. And when I write, that is another thing that it is always because there is some question or some glimmer or some mystery, and then I just get to the page to see what's there and to dig underneath it. And water just became, definitely a metaphor for all of the things. It is the element that holds all this space. But even when I landed here, the first thing I did was go to the ocean and pay my respects and fill my soul, because I live landlocked in Colorado now, and that is the hardest part. And I think now that I'm getting older, I'm like, I'm going to have to move back to the sea. I just need to see it. Yeah.
It does say, you did, in your bio, you say that you were raised on
Yes.
water. Yeah.
Yeah,
And I love the quote also from Carson about you can't be thinking about water without being lyrical.
Yeah.
So, yeah, thank you for that. Other queries or just thoughts might be coming to you. Yeah, Tina, Christina.
I have a question that I don't even quite know how to phrase this. Shannon and I talked very briefly earlier about how to integrate the kind of thinking that we in arts and humanities do into the worldview, if you like, or the whole mental of people who actually work in environmental science people, and in my case, I'm interested, as I said again, in a program. It's in Maine, but we're trying to put humanities and arts in there. So I have a very, real reason for asking this. But these are people who are interested, in fish, in bringing the fish back, or the food way. I have one guy that is involved in this. He's a historian, a wonderful thing on the 17th century, food tracks of fish in the Gulf of Mexico. So this is a different kind of thinking. So do you have any experience with talking with people like that? Because they do, these young people in this college, they're not all that young. They're unusual people. They're interested in the life of people who live on the coast of Maine, how they can survive on the coast of Maine, all of those things. So I would love to have artists involved in this program, but I just wonder, have you had experience with that sort of thinking? Or that?
I feel like I've encountered a lot of scientists who've been grateful for the fact that I've layered emotion that's relatable onto scientific fact. I haven't encountered a lot of resistance, and so, because sometimes I'm like, oh, in my parallel life, I am a cytologist and I'm not a writer, but then I meet the cytologists and they're like, no, we need you too. We need you to put it together and make it beautiful and make it sing and make it resonate, because otherwise, and so we all need each other. But I have not encountered that much resistance. I think, especially when people see the work, see their science embodied, and they see how it connects and resonates with people, then they are usually bought in to how that's effective.
It would resonate, I'm sure, with the sorts of people I'm talking about.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just say from somebody who's invested in the Environmental Arts and Humanities Initiative, we've had so much support actually from those who are part of our Berkeley Climate Coalition Network. One of the funny ways that Bruce Reardon, who's a staff member who tries to keep track of everything going on climate related on our campus, he said to my class a couple of months ago, let's face it, climate science, the main format in which it has been communicated is the PowerPoint. And we need forms other than the PowerPoint. We need, story or fragmented story. We need visuals. We need provocation. We need emotion, all of these other things. And we need to find different, however roundabout ways of getting, and we need everybody involved. And I just appreciate, though, too, something other than the PowerPoint as the artistic format for engaging with your science. So thanks for that question. And Christina Gillis, some of you may know, is one of the most influential associate directors of the Townsend Center, our Townsend Center for the Humanities, rock star staff member who made such an impact on our campus for promoting the humanities. So thanks for carrying it forward. All right. Another question? Yes. Here and then John. Yeah.
I don't know if you have answered this question in the previous discussion because I left for a while. Sorry. I really love the theme of your book, and I want to ask, if you think there's a relationship between the concept of women and the nature, because I feel like there's always sort of connection or similarities shared between women and the nature. Thank you.
And I worry about that one. Yes, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, I think often I describe this book as eco-feminist essays, and that it's inspecting those patterns of degradation that I see happening in similar shapes and forms to the bodies of women and the bodies of animals and bodies of water, and looking at those parallels. And so, yeah, it's hard for me not to see those patterns. Yeah.
Maybe here, John. Here, last question from John.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was great. I'm going to risk a declaration comment, and so I think I'll lead with the question. I'm curious to hear you talk a little bit more about engaging the reader. Something that I always key into in a lot of ways, but also I teach writing, and I'm reluctant to push that. And I think that one of the things I recognize I need to trust my students more. But listening to you talk about fragments and fragmented, I was struck by how much fragments almost kind of necessitate some sort of synthesis. When I heard you talk about the tumbleweeds and the hoods at the bottom of the ocean, thinking surf and turf, and figurative language kind of embodied in that sense. But to be honest, I mean, for as much as I want to just be like, oh, I get it, I also, I started to recognize, and this is like my engagement as a reader, how much I want to synthesize, how much I want to connect, how much I want to, in some sense, impose my own or a narrative on it. And at first I was like, is that the man in me? Or is that the Western ideology that I think has been kind of drummed into me? And so here's where it's the comment, I think, is that it really helped me think about different ways of engaging your text, and it challenged me. And maybe I'm going on too much, but one of the things I have my students look for when they're doing critical reading is when the author says, my point is, or I'm arguing that, or I'm not arguing that, and you didn't do that.
I don't do that.
And when I realized that, I realized that it's not so much the fragments between chapters, but it's the fragments within the text as well.
Yeah.
That you're leaving that open. You're saying, here's one image, one story, one anecdote, and here's another one.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and let them talk to each other and let the reader.
Let the reader discover how they talk to each other. Yeah, I feel like there was one more thing that was related to that. Where did this? Where should Oh, I guess I did it in the art talk, but I feel like a lot of this book is about eco grief, and one of the things that I really wanted people to do is feel permission to drop into their sadness, into their grief, and that is what a lot of reader feedback, now that this book has been out for 6 months in the world, has been like, oh, I feel like I feel seen, and I feel like I can drop into it, and I can cry, and I can sit in it, and I'm gonna be okay, and I actually feel better. And I was listening to a podcast the other day. It just came out. The Way Out is in. It's a Buddhist Thich Nhat Hanh podcast, and Ocean Vuong, who's an incredible writer and poet and author, said, "Happiness isn't joy. Happiness is I have a heart." And I thought that was just so beautiful. And I've been signing my books from the beginning, from my blue heart to yours, because it's just that again is inclusive. Like that includes the hearts that are distressed and the hearts that are anxious, and to have a heart is to be alive and to feel, and that is proof of your connection to life. And so that has been a major aim of mine, is just connecting on a heart level and giving permission to drop into their grief and sadness.
Wow, wonderful. John, thank you for that last question that prompted this kind of response from Christina. And thank you all for being with us. Help me thank Christina Rivera for her incredible work.